What does a culture owe to its past? I ask because historians, archaeologists, and the rest of the gang go to the ends of the earth to uncover, document, and analyze the worlds of yesterday. But after the papers are published, the books go to print, and the museum galleries open, the question that lingers in our brain and claws at our thoughts is what we all do with that hard-earned knowledge. What do we take as lessons? What ideas and movements do we build on? Which facets of our past do we choose to reject? If capital H history assembles facts to build narratives, the next step in that process is interpreting those narratives as individuals and communities, and that is the domain of what's called reception studies. For a prime example, consider the Renaissance, the reception of ancient Greco-Roman culture by artists and writers in 14 and 1500s Italy, and the subsequent revival of classical ideas in this new context. That's the obvious one, but reception is as complex, varied, and evolving a process as the march of time itself. Every society has a different relationship to its past, and just because Italy had the Renaissance does not mean that, say, Byzantine Greeks in the 1400s got any of the same ideas. So with reception in mind, let's cast our eye to the city of Athens and investigate two pieces of architecture: the Metropolitan Cathedral of Athens, aka the Mitropoli, and its aptly named predecessor, the Little Metropoly. The smaller sibling is from the late medieval period when the Byzantine Empire was on its way out, while our big boy is from the 1800s just after Greek independence. I adore them both for vibes alone, but with the lens of reception studies, these churches reveal the changing nature of Athens' relationship to its past, from ancient through Byzantine to modern. So, to peek into the Athenian mind while appreciating some good domes, let's do some history. Now, as our story begins in the medieval era, Athens was distinctly not the center of the Greek world. That position had been long since eclipsed by the imperial capital of Constantinople with landmark churches like Hagia Sophia. Mwah. Gorgeous. But thankfully for the Athenian ego, that fragile little flower, we are not in the business of comparison today, because Athens had plenty to admire in the Byzantine period. Top of the figurative heap at the top of the literal hill was the converted Parthenon Basilica, known as Panagia Atheniotissa, or Most Holy Mary the Athenian. But the Christianized city did see some new construction, and in the 1000s AD, Athens assembled the Church of Panagia Kapnikarea, which for our purposes is an illustrative example of the Athenian style. A floor plan emulating the square Greek cross built from a combination of large stones and thin bricks, with the key feature being a tall, 8-sided dome with windows on all sides to pour light into the interior like a natural chandelier. Aha! This, you see, is the genius of the Athenians. Sorry, blacked out for a second. Alright, back on track. While it's not the biggest dome in the world, nor the most famous temple in antiquity, this has an understated elegance, and it's unique to the city. Plus, the way the light flows in is just, nice. Medieval Athens had 40-odd churches in total, but with this as our anchor point for the Athenian style, let's pivot to the really weird one. So here we meet the most vivid yet confoundingly opaque piece of architecture in Greece, the Church of Panagia Gordoepikous, built in the residence of the Metropolitan Bishop of Athens and thus known colloquially as the Little Metropoly. Normally, I'd set the scene with a year and all the relevant historical happenings, but this church defies all that because we have no dang clue when the thing was built. The dates range from as early as the 700s AD to the mid-1400s after the Ottomans showed up. Oh no, don't worry about narrowing that down at all, it's only 2/3 the runtime of the Byzantine Empire. Ugh, pain. Now, with some inference, we can actually trim down that range, as the earliest date pins the church on Empress Irene of Athens, who tradition credits with several churches in the city she provably did not build, so the next likely time point is when Michael Koniatis was Metropolitan Bishop of Athens in the late 1100s, right before all the Crusaders showed up to make a mess of things. That's already much better, but put a pin in my historian's angst for a minute while we look at what this church is actually doing, and then we'll see what it can tell us about the city and people of Athens. The one familiar feature here is the general layout: square floor plan, nice Athenian dome, a bit on the small size but nothing out of the ordinary. It's what the Metropoly is made out of that's so wacky, because instead of the mixed brick and stone construction typical of everything else, this church is covered in big slabs of smooth marble, several of which are intricately carved with crosses, figures, inscriptions, and tons of patterns. This is what's called spolia, the spoils taken from ruins and repurposed in a new building, like Renaissance Romans taking marble from the Colosseum to build St. Peter's Basilica. The difference here is that instead of sanding the spolia down to be good as new, the Metropoly deliberately flaunts, hey, look at all this cool stuff we found. And beyond just a piece here and a piece there, the whole church is built out of the stuff. Everything but the fresh-baked roof tiles are assembled from Athens' architectural history. And they weren't being choosy with their material, as 3/4 of the stones are Byzantine-era carvings, but 1/4 of these are very ancient and extremely pagan. That's a bold pairing for a Christian church, but to avoid it being heresy, some of the mythological figures are inscribed with a cross for the official seal of, don't worry, it's not heresy, we just like the art. There is, quite simply, nothing else like this anywhere. It's so distinct and so darn weird that we have no parallel for it in Byzantine history. But if I may indulge the science of vibes, it feels like it fits because it is, by design, completely cohesive. Aesthetically, the color palette fits since it's mainly Pentelic white marble with a touch of light blue from Mount Imitos, and thematically they're both local Athenian stone. But the arrangement of all that marble turns this from a hodgepodge of ancient nonsense into a curated museum gallery composed with perfect symmetry. Looking at the front, everything from the decorative flourishes, crosses, animal figures, column capitals, and even the completely blank stones at person height are deliberately mirrored. I cannot tell you with confidence what this arrangement means, but it clearly meant something to the builder, something worth putting in the absolute work, and they thought Athens' ancient past was just as worthy of that work. Now, does the choice and arrangement of Spolia get us closer to a who or when of construction? According to some scholarship, yes, as some carvings fit with styles from the 1200s, and one inscription might have still been in a scrap heap as late as 1436, suggesting construction during the late Crusader or even Ottoman periods. On hard facts, it's still inconclusive, but we can see evidence of a curated memory of Athens that goes beyond just the Christian era. That opens the door to a far more complex relationship between the Byzantines and their classical predecessors. So, fast forward 4 to 6 centuries and our picture becomes clear once again, as Greece gains independence from the Ottoman Empire, with Athens chosen as the new nation's capital in 1834. And it's here that the Athenians made some choices. They repurposed several medieval churches as ad hoc administrative buildings, turning the Little Metropoly into a public library before reconsecrating it in 1862. They destroyed several other churches to fit their new urban grid plan, with Kapnikarea only saved by the personal request of the king's dad. And lastly, they took stones from over 70 churches across Athens to put towards a new project, a grander Metropolitan Cathedral to mark the city's new chapter. And so we come to the Mitropoli. This time the big one. Begun in 1842, stopped in 1843 because they ran out of money and the stereotypes apparently have to start somewhere, and completed in 1862. Like its little brother, the Metropoly keeps a familiar layout while sporting very unfamiliar aesthetics, combining classical and Byzantine design elements. That pairing doesn't make for the most harmoniously designed church, but it does signal an intent, casting modern Greece as the inheritor and shepherd of both traditions. A noted omission here is the 400 years of Ottoman rule. Naturally, the Athenians weren't about to cop a visual flourish from their subjugators, and even celebrating Byzantine culture was dodgy in the 1800s with the old capital Constantinople still out of reach. However, the Metropoly acknowledges that chapter in its choice of buried saints, the martyrs Philothei and Patriarch Gregorios V, both of whom died at the hands of the Ottomans. Taken together, the Metropoly declares that their nation is the latest step in a very long history. Now, not to get lost in the slap fight about the artistic merits of the church, but the facade diverges from the Athenian style with those twin bell towers, and not for the better. I, for one, don't like that they overshadow the dome. That is my first, last, and fiercest criticism. But while it loses me for dome erasure and slightly wonky proportions, it wins me back with the details, synthesizing 2,000 plus years of classical and Byzantine culture into a purely Athenian work of art. To point out a few, traditional Pentelic and Himitos marble, national colors white and blue in the windows, tons of ancient elements with Christian motifs like crosses on columns and doorway pediments with Alpha Omega, acanthus leaf flourishes on the roof for a very classy bit of classical design, and possibly my favorite sneaky detail, a running band of marble emulating the decorative brickwork of medieval churches, and a little bit of the metope breaks on ancient temples. The Metropoly on its own is no masterpiece, but it rewards an attentive eye, becoming a window into how modern Athens understood its past and how it chose to construct its new identity. Where it shines is taken alongside the Little Metropoly as an elegant side-by-side of Athens then and now. At both points in time, the city gave physical form to its cultural memory, cataloging and curating the relationship with their past. The styles differ, but the core statements align. Athens is the product of endurance and renewal. The Little Metropoly makes the metaphor overt by literally picking up the ruined stones of Athens' past and building something new with them. It's at once old, new, and a single link in a chain of millennia, made in the hope that later Athenians would receive their work and add another link. What we owe to our past is, above all, memory. Everything else follows from there. No, hold on, that was way too sincere. Domes! You owe them domes! Thank you, Athens, for showing us the way. Now let's get out of here before the praise goes to their ginormous ego. I am currently on location in Athens, right next to the Little Metropoly and the Big Metropoly, doing some research, taking some pictures, making some observations, and I would have loved to record like an insert for the video with like script, but the problem with doing research on location is I haven't written the script yet, so